From the very first time a motorcycle charged through a cheering crowd and crossed the finish line under a sky filled with black and white flags, ordinary people like us have dreamed of one simple thing: to go fast. We idolize those daring racers with their masterful skills. And then we wonder, what does it feel like to ride a machine like the one they're on? These days, that dream seems almost within reach. For the price of a small mobile home, you can own a lightweight sport bike with over 200 horsepower, equipped with winglets, sensors, and electronic systems just like a MotoGP race bike. And if you've got money to spare, there are even limited edition motorcycles priced over $100,000, advertised as the closest thing to a real MotoGP machine. But is that really true? Has a real race bike ever rolled down the street? Not a watered-down version, not one with reduced performance to meet emissions rules, but a true V4 two-stroke monster that stepped straight off the racetrack and onto the road? Today's story is about the first time, and also the last time, that ever happened. And of course, that name could only be Yamaha RD500LC, the dream of race bikes for the masses. For decades, that dream of riding a real race bike remained just that, a dream. The machines we saw on TV, screaming down the straights of Mugello or dancing through corners at Suzuka, belonged to another world entirely. They were lighter, sharper, faster, and far too wild for public roads. The bikes you could buy at your local dealer, sure, some were sporty, some even looked fast standing still. But under the surface, they were watered down, tamed for safety, softened for comfort, and stripped of the raw aggression that made the Grand Prix machines so unforgettable. But Yamaha saw an opportunity. In the early 1980s, they didn't just want to sell motorcycles. They wanted to sell the experience, the full-throttle, heart-racing feeling of what it was like to ride a world-class machine. And not just on a racetrack, but on your daily commute, on a winding back road, on Main Street. So they set out to do what no other manufacturer had dared: take a real GP bike and put a license plate on it. No compromises, no safety net, just two-stroke fury, V4 madness, and the kind of machine that could blow the doors off anything in sight if you were brave enough to hang on. Grand Prix glory and a crisis of power. In the late 1970s, Yamaha was on top of the racing world. Their weapon of choice? The YZR500, an inline-4 two-stroke missile that tore through the 500cc Grand Prix class like nothing else. And with Kenny Roberts in the saddle, they didn't just win. They dominated. 3 back-to-back world championships in 78, 79, and 80. Yamaha had the bike. Kenny had the skill. Together, they rewrote the playbook on what a race team could achieve. But dominance never lasts forever. By 1981, Suzuki struck back with something new. The RG500. It wasn't just fast, it was brilliant. A square 4 configuration gave Suzuki better balance, more flexibility, and more power where it counted. Suddenly, Yamaha's once unstoppable inline 4 started to feel limited, outgunned, outclassed. Yamaha knew they couldn't keep squeezing performance out of the same old setup forever. If they wanted to stay competitive, they needed to change the rules, rethink the architecture. And so, quietly, behind the scenes, they began working on a new kind of machine. Not another inline 4, not another compromise. A fourth, a cleaner, narrower, more efficient layout. One that could breathe deeper, rev harder, and take the fight right back to Suzuki, on their own turf. A race bike disguised as a street machine. Then came 1983. After years of chasing podiums and playing catch-up with Suzuki, Yamaha decided it was time to flip the script. Not just on the racetrack, but on the showroom floor. And what they unveiled was something no one saw coming: the Yamaha RD500LC. On paper, it was a street bike, but in person, it was a Grand Prix missile dressed up with headlights and turn signals, low clip-on handlebars, a race-style frame, side-mounted exhausts that screamed pure aggression. This wasn't just inspired by Yamaha's legendary YZR500. It was practically a clone. For the first time ever, Yamaha wasn't selling you a sport bike that looked fast. They were selling you the real thing. Sure, it had mirrors, it had a license plate bracket. You could technically ride it to the grocery store, but make no mistake, this was a race bike first, and a street machine second. A two-stroke V4 powered wolf in very thin sheep's clothing. It wasn't built to be easy. It wasn't built to be practical. It was built to make your heart race the moment you twisted the throttle. A machine ahead of its time. Pop the seat, peek inside. What you'll find under the skin of the RD500LC isn't just impressive, it's extraordinary. At the heart of this beast was something no other street bike had at the time: a liquid-cooled 50-degree V4 two-stroke engine. It was compact, it was wicked fast, and it was unlike anything else on showroom floors in 1983. But Yamaha didn't stop at the engine. They gave this bike real race-bred tech, right down to the smallest bolt. The Japanese domestic version, known as the RZV500R, came with a full aluminum frame. The engine cases used magnesium covers. The mufflers were aluminum. Even the kickstarter was forged alloy. Cast wheels, race-tuned geometry, no fluff, no filler, and the whole thing weighed just 413 pounds dry. For a 500cc V4 two-stroke, that's featherweight territory. But the magic wasn't just in the materials, it was in the power delivery. Yamaha's YPVS system, Yamaha Power Valve System, adjusted the exhaust port timing based on RPM, giving the bike torque down low and a screaming top end when you opened it up. The result? Smooth when you needed it, brutal when you wanted it. A two-stroke that could do it all and made sure you felt every bit of it. Sky-high price, and still sold out. Of course, all that engineering didn't come cheap. When the Yamaha RD500LC hit the market, it carried a price tag of £2,999. That was right in line with heavyweight legends of the day. Bikes like the Kawasaki GPZ 1100 or the Suzuki Katana. In other words, this wasn't a toy for beginners. It was priced for the serious rider. And yet, it flew off the shelves. In Europe and Canada, where the bike was officially sold, Yamaha couldn't build them fast enough. Collectors, racers, and everyday thrill seekers lined up to get their hands on one. In the United States, emissions laws kept it from being sold directly. But that didn't stop dedicated fans from importing them over the border, one by one. Even with all that demand, total global production barely cleared 10,000 units. Why so few? Well, for one, it was expensive to make. The bike used premium materials, cutting-edge parts, and required race-grade precision. And two, regulations were tightening. Two-strokes were already falling out of favor. The world was changing. And the RD500LC, it was built for a different time, when speed mattered more than smog checks. The sharper, meaner successor. Yamaha may have fired the first shot, but it was Suzuki that took things even further. Just 1 year after the RD500LC hit the streets, Suzuki responded with a machine that didn't just look like a race bike. It was a race bike. Enter the RG500 Gamma. While Yamaha had chosen a V4, Suzuki stuck with their tried-and-true formula. A square four, two-stroke engine, nearly identical to the one powering their factory GP machines. It was lighter, it was leaner, and it packed more punch across the rev range. To the purists, it wasn't just a better bike, it was the closest thing anyone had ever sold to the public that felt like a real Grand Prix machine. And yet, just like the RD500LC, the Gamma didn't last. It came in fast, made a lot of noise, and then vanished. caught in the same tightening noose of emissions regulations and the rising dominance of four-stroke technology. But for that brief moment in the mid-'80s, two Japanese giants dared to give everyday riders a taste of the track. And the Gamma? It proved just how wild that ride could truly be. The ride experience, not for the faint of heart. Twist the throttle below 5,000 RPM, and the RD500LC feels almost tame. Smooth, balanced, civilized even, but cross the 7,000 mark, and everything changes. The power hits like a hammer. The engine lets out a banshee scream. And before you know it, you're doing twice the speed limit with white knuckles and a wild grin. This wasn't a bike you just hopped on and rode casually. With low clip-ons, high rear sets, and a riding position straight out of the GP paddock, it demanded commitment. Long rides? Your back and wrists would beg for mercy. But on a twisty back road or an empty straightaway, it came alive. It wasn't forgiving. The throttle was sharp. The brakes were aggressive. The handling was twitchy, surgical in the right hands, terrifying in the wrong ones. Even around town, it kept you on edge. Too much low-speed cruising and you'd foul the plugs, forcing you to blip the throttle now and then just to keep things clean. This bike didn't want to behave. It wanted to be ridden. And only a certain kind of rider could truly unlock what it had to offer. A legacy never repeated. The RD500LC was never meant to last forever. It burned hot and fast, just 2 short years in production. But in that brief window, it made a statement that echoed far beyond the showroom floor. Yamaha didn't just build a motorcycle, they built a moment in time. The RD500LC was the first, and almost certainly the last, street-legal, V4, 2-stroke rocket ever born from a real Grand Prix machine. It wasn't refined, it wasn't practical, and it sure wasn't for everybody. But that's what made it special. It was a product of courage, of a company willing to take a risk when the world was already starting to turn its back on 2-strokes. And while it may have paved the way for the modern sport bike, it also marked the end of an era, one where raw power, wild engineering, and racing DNA made it out onto public roads. Since then, nothing like it has come again. And truthfully, nothing probably ever will. Because machines like this weren't made to last. They were made to prove a point. And the RD500LC proved it, loud and clear. These days, you won't see an RD500LC rolling down the street. Nobody's selling it at a showroom. Nobody's advertising it on TV. It doesn't have electronic rider modes, no traction control, no quick shifter. But for those who've heard that 2-stroke howl at 10,000 RPM, for those who've felt the violent surge as it hits the power band, or even just stood silently next to one in a parking lot, they know. This wasn't just another motorcycle, it was a symbol, a bold experiment. And maybe the last goodbye to an era when manufacturers still dared to go a little crazy, when they built machines not to sell easily, but to inspire. What about you? Have you ever seen, ridden, or dreamed of owning an RD500LC? What strikes you most about this bike? Is it the sound, the V4 2-stroke engine, or just the way it challenged every norm? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because it's your stories that bring legends like this back to life. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, as we dive into more motorcycles that the world tried to forget, but never really could. See you in the next ride.